Today we are talking about why flying isn't scary and why it is sometimes, and when as a passenger you can just relax and when as a pilot you need to pay special attention. So stick around because we are talking about how the most fatal accidents happen statistically and how they can be avoided. Let's get into it. To me, the most scary thing as a passenger would be an engine failure, an engine going out. But as a pilot, that's not the most scary thing that I can think of because, well, there's a few reasons. To put it simply, an airplane won't fall out of the sky if it loses its engine. The way aerodynamics work is essentially if you are moving at a certain speed, it's not always speed, but we'll just say speed. If you're moving at a certain speed through the air, your wings are generating lift by what's called an airfoil on the leading edge of your wing. So all that's to say that if you have speed going through the air, you're going to stay in the air. You're not going to just drop straight out of the sky. You can float down and potentially land safely without anybody getting hurt. So the engine going out really isn't as big of a deal as you might think. In fact, in a commercial plane, the big jets that most people fly, if an engine goes out, you are oftentimes so high that you can almost always get to an airport and land safely, and you might not have even known anything happened. Except for the smoke and you know what I mean. But that also means that there is one stage of flight that is the most dangerous stage, and that is takeoff. Now think about it. As you're taking off, you are trying to gain speed in order to lift, right? But as you're going up, you're gaining speed, but you're lifting. So you're not very high off the ground just yet. Well, you come out over a lot of times houses because you're not over the runway anymore, and you're going up, you're going slow, and you're low. So what were to happen if your engine went out right then? Well, what would happen is you wouldn't have enough altitude to get some speed, right? So you would oftentimes just drop right out of the sky. This is the most dangerous phase of flight because if you do get out off of the runway, you get up about 500-ish feet, you can no longer turn around, you don't have enough altitude to a lot of times get to a safe place to land, so the only landing option you have is right in front of you. And if that doesn't look very appealing, like say there's a house there or a bunch of cars or whatever, well, someone's gonna have to die. But I'm not trying to scare you in this video because that doesn't happen very often. In fact, when you're flying one of those commercial jets like with Delta or United, you're actually 55 times more likely to get struck by lightning than to die in one of those commercial flights. Well, why is this? Well, there are many reasons. And we're going to dive into some of those reasons later in the video, and actually the main reason that most people die in airplane accidents, and we're going to get into that later in the video. But right now, suffice it to say that those jets have multiple engines, so if one goes out, you still got another one. The engines that they do have are very reliable, they're not likely to go out, and they run very routine and meticulous maintenance checks on those airplanes to make sure something like that doesn't happen, obviously because that's a huge risk and liability for them. I know what you're thinking. Okay, that's great for commercial aviation, but what about for private aviation? What if I want to fly a little airplane? That's what I do all the time. I fly little airplanes with just one engine with a propeller in the front of it, bringing it through the sky. That's a little more dangerous. That takeoff phase is still the most dangerous phase of flight for me. If that engine goes out, I've got to know where I'm going to land. Now, there are a few key benefits to a smaller plane, and that is, A, if my engine does go out, I can glide for a lot longer than those jets because my lift to weight ratio is a lot better than those jets. So that's one good thing. The other good thing is that the takeoff phase in a jet or in a small plane is so short that the risk is mitigated by just getting high as fast as you can. And as soon as you get that altitude, then every 100 feet you go up, the risk is being more and more mitigated by that altitude. So as far as engine failure goes, that is not the most dangerous thing that can happen. And when it comes to flying commercial aviation, in most cases, you're taking a higher risk by driving to the airport to get on that flight than you are actually flying the flight. If that makes you feel any better, maybe just walk to the airport next time. Statistically, driving is actually more risky than flying commercially. Now, flying the little planes, like I said, the ones that I fly, that's a little different. Those planes statistically are about as dangerous as driving a motorcycle. In fact, they're more dangerous than statistically driving a motorcycle, which is actually pretty dangerous, unfortunately. Everything that's fun is dangerous. Why is general aviation so much more dangerous than commercial aviation? The reason that most fatalities happen in both general aviation and commercial aviation. It's not an engine failure. It's not that a wing falls off in flight. It's not that a landing gear didn't come down. The reason is pilot error. Invariably, most of the fatal accidents have to do with something that the pilot did wrong early on in the flight. They didn't know how to fly with an autopilot. They took off in weather they weren't used to flying in. They didn't ease into it. They'd never flown in clouds and now they're taking off in a snowstorm. Or maybe they're not even IFR rated and they're flying in the clouds and all of a sudden a mountain pops up out of nowhere and they hit the mountain. That stuff happens all the time. That is why these fatality rates for general aviation are so high. You've got pilots that don't really know how to fly in certain weather, flying in it anyways. So pilot error is the number one cause for fatal crashes in general aviation. Now that's a great sign. That's a great statistic because that means by more training and more attention to detail, we can make our own flights safer as pilots. What if I'm not a pilot? What if I'm just a passenger? Well, I've got a couple tips for you. First, if you're flying commercial aviation, there's no reason to be nervous unless you've ever been struck by lightning. And even then, there's 55 times more of a chance to be struck by lightning than dying in a commercial aviation flight. But if you're still nervous, then just keep those nerves for the beginning of the flight because that takeoff is the most dangerous part. Once you're well high in the sky, you can look out your window and say, wow, we are really high in the sky. Take that pillow and go to sleep because nothing's going to happen. Now, in the general aviation, if you're flying within a small airplane, here are some things to consider. Make sure that your pilot is very competent and his attention to detail is very extreme. Safety is high on his priority list. Because frankly, if it's not, there is a chance that you might not make it down in the way that you want it to, if you know what I mean. So know your pilot. When it comes to the small aviation, there are some people that I may not feel comfortable flying with unless I had my own set of controls. Alright, so we've established that most of the time, the general cause of fatal accidents, whether it's in general aviation or commercial aviation, is actually pilot error. We've established that takeoff is the most dangerous part of the flight because you are low and you are slow. And I hope I've established in your mind that flying isn't scary, except for when you don't know what you're doing. This has been Eric with The Aviator. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.